Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another VES-Artex Academy webinar. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. Victor Cabrera from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we're going to be talking about the economics of using beef semen in dairy herds. Just a few things before we get started. You can ask questions throughout the presentation via the question and answer section at the bottom of the screen, or you can ask it during the chat. We will be looking at all of the questions towards the end of the presentation. And if we're not able to get to your presentation or to your question, then we will answer it personally after the event. So I'd like to turn over the table to Dr. Cabrera. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Victor Cabrera. I'm a professor and extension dairy specialist with the Animal and Dairy Sciences at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. So very excited here, and thanks to VES for inviting me to share some work we are doing about the use of sexed and beef semen in dairy herds. So here you can see the title, and what I would like to discuss with you today is economic strategies of using sexed semen and beef semen in dairy herds. And you can see here a couple of logos. One is the dairy management website, which I run. And if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you and invite you to visit. It has a number of decision support tools, including the one I'm gonna discuss today. And those tools are open and available to everyone who would like to use them. And they are for the general, very simple and easy to use. One extra resource you may have at your disposal. And the other logo here is from the Dairy Brain Project. I'm not gonna talk about that today, but that's something very interesting. We are also working at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and you could find also on my website additional information if you are interested on it. It's basically trying to use the most of the data, different data sources at the farm level. Anyway, let's go with the presentation. So good thing now farmers, more than a few years or decades ago, is that they have good options for the reproduction program. And I'm referring to the options of breeding different type of semen to the animals. When we have a cow that's ready to be bred, it's eligible to be bred, farmers have been using conventional semen as a regular choice. Sex semen has been increasing quite a bit in the last decade or so. And even beef nowadays is very common on dairy farms, and even more in the last 5 years or so. There is an opportunity here to combine these types of semen towards a more sustainable dairy industry to improve the profitability and have still a very efficient dairy farm system. The decision depends on many factors, but basically genetics and age or the state of the animal would be very important on the decision what type of semen we would use. Likely we want to use, for example, for the best animals, sex semen, and likely we would like to use for the lowest genetics on the herd, beef semen, for example. And the age is refer what lactation, what stage of the lactation the animal is, that also will give an opportunity to use different type of semen. So if we move forward, there are three main areas from which the decision will be important to take a look. On top here is the replacements needed. This is critical because the assumption, and actually a realistic assumption, is the fact that most of the farmers would like to have enough replacements from inside the farm being produced on the farm. Even though it's possible to buy or sell animals, that may not be the preferred choice of the farmers. Indeed, if they overproduce animals, can they sell efficiently? Or if it, more importantly, maybe, if they underproduce replacements, can they buy? Would they be, even if they can buy, are they comfortable buying additional animals from other farms and other parts. So that's important to find out how many replacements we need. Then another important point would be the performance. Depending on the type of semen, whether it is sex or beef semen, what's gonna be the performance we will expect on our herd. And obviously, one important point here on the right bottom is the prices. And here, the most important probably we're talking about is the value of the calves we're producing, whether they are crossbred or whether they are Holstein, male or female, and the cost of the semen that's gonna be used for the different protocols of reproduction. So we came out with this name, income from calves over semen cost. And the main idea is basically to make a balance. What's the value of bringing these crossbred animals in addition to our replacements, and how much we need to invest mostly on semen and other things, obviously, but principally on semen to make that happen. And at the end, we wanna make sure that will give us more net return than our current situation. So we developed this tool that's very simple to use that we call Premium Dairy on Beef Program. And basically, if you can see here, I'm gonna go a little more in the details next. But the main idea here is to come up with a number here that's the income from calves over semen cost. It's a dollar value, which is very important, and that called the attentions of the farmers. But that will depend on how many replacements we have and what are the semen combinations we want to use. So basically, the tool allows the user to set up protocols of reproduction, and the tool will give you how much is the value at the end and how many replacements we are used, and if we are having enough replacements out from our own reproduction protocol. So here's how the tool looks like. There is a version that is a spreadsheet, but this is also fully programmed in an online system. So it's easier to use directly on the web browser. And basically the idea is to fill up the yellow cells here, and the blue and other color cells will be the results. Like for example, here, this number 4,036 is the net return we will expect, the income from calves over semen cost. And the 7 here is the balance of produced minus required calves. So in this case, we are having enough replacement and we are having an extra value from this proposition. But let me go in a little more detail that I think it's helpful. The idea of this tool is go through these steps. The step number 1 is basically to define your herd as it is right now. And immediately internally, there is a model there that will give you what is the female calves required every single month. Like in this case, 38 animals, for example. So now with the next steps, you may find out if you are able or not to reach that goal, let's say. In the next step, actually internally as well, the model calculates how many animals are eligible to be bred in different stages, whether they are heifers in first service or lactation 1, 2, or later lactations in first, second, or later services. And these are suggested numbers, which say here projected, like for example, 37 animals in the first breeding for heifers. But the user always has the ability, and it is encouraged to adjust these numbers if there are better numbers at the farm level. The user also defines what is the expected conception rate, whether we use conventional sex or beef semen in each one of these groups of animals. And in the bottom part here, the user can define what's the proportion of females and males we would expect, whether we use conventional sex or beef semen, and what are the costs of those semen types. Next, in 3 and 4 here, basically the user can split each one of the breeding groups in top and bottom, and we can use different type of semen on those groups of animals. Like for example, here in this breeding service, we will use conventional for the top 25%, and we will use beef semen for the bottom 75% of animals. Number 4 is only for display purposes. It's calculating how many animals we're producing by our semen utilization protocols. And number 5 is basically the final result here, telling you, as I mentioned before, what is the expected income from calves over semen cost, and what is the balance of produced minus required calves produced. Obviously, at this point, the user in the yellow part needs to define what's the calf value expected by producing calves from conventional semen, from sex semen, and from beef semen. If you look here, for example, in this case, conventional sex semen will produce the same value calves, which may be normal. It may happen that the sex semen will give you a better value calves. That could be the case, so the user can define that. And for the beef semen, the other thing that I want to point out here is normally we use the same value, whether it is male or female calf, because that's normally what happened in many parts of the US, at least, that regardless of the sex or the gender of the calf, the value would be the same and normally higher than the average of male and female using conventional or sex semen. Anyway, that changes, and that's why it's important to have a decision support tool that follows the changes in the management and the changes in the market prices as well. So using the tool, what I would like to do now is give you an insight of what would happen in different plausible semen use combinations. So the idea is, let's use the tool and do all the scenarios we think are possible and feasible, and find out what are the situations in which it's better or worse to use sex and beef semen, and at what level would, or let's put it in a different way, what would be the best protocol of sex, beef, and conventional semen, depending on conditions of the market and conditions of the farm. And in this case, for example, we define a farm with 1,000 cows just for facility on the calculations, with 35% culling rate, which is very normal, 7% still birth rate, which is also very normal. And then we set up 3 different levels of reproductive performance: low, medium, and high. And just to give you an idea what it means, the reproduction level, high, medium, and low, there is a difference between heifers and cows. And for the case of heifers, the medium repro performance was set up to be 55% conception rate at the first breeding on the heifers. And for the medium also, the 21-day pregnancy rate for the cows was set up to 20%, whether it was 30% for the high reproduction level and 15% for the low reproductive performance. And so if we set up this in the tool originally, we can find out immediately what are the required animals head per month at the different reproduction levels. Like, for example, for the medium reproduction level, we will need 39 female calves to be born every month, and that will become about 2 years later, 32 springers ready to be incorporated to the adult herd. Okay, and that will change. If it is low reproduction performance, we will need more, and if it is high reproduction performance, we will need less. Okay, so that's an advantage of having better reproduction, obviously, and that's interesting how this interacts actually with the use of different types of semen. Okay, so the other thing we calculated internally with the tool at different reproduction performance levels is the number of breeding eligible animals in each category. Whether it is different services or different lactation groups, how many animals we would have to be bred at that point, okay? Again, it will change depending on the reproduction performance. For example, for high reproduction performance, we will have more animals every single time for the first service in heifers, but probably much less animals in very late lactations and late breedings on those lactations, okay? So again, in the tool, for a specific use in a specific farm, these numbers could and should be changed. But for the purpose of this analysis, I think that's a very good way to see what it would happen in these different situations. Next thing I want to show you here very briefly, I know there are a lot of numbers, but the point is that we use about 80% the performance of the sex semen compared with the conventional. What I'm saying is, if our conventional semen reproduction performance conception rate at the first service for heifers was 60, then that meant that if we use sex semen on those semen, the same animals, we would expect only 48% of conception rate, which is very well documented in the literature, okay? And you can see this, and you can have access to this information. I can pass that along after the seminar as well. But the point is, this will change depending on the lactation and the different breedings. And we try to put the numbers that were most common to the farms in the US, mostly Wisconsin, I would say. Now, here's the interesting part. We set up different sex semen use protocols, okay? And you can see here, not use of sex semen as one scenario. And then we have another 5 scenarios of use of sex semen from only the first service of heifers all the way to the first service in the second lactation and first service in the primiparous and 2 services on the heifers, okay? So these 2 semens that we use still some sex semen even at the second lactation, the first breeding of the second lactation. But in addition to that, we will use sex semen in the first breeding of the primiparous and first and second breeding of the heifers. There is one specific and different scenario here that we call the top, in which we did a little different, in which we use sex semen in the first 2 breedings of the heifers, first and second breeding, plus the first breeding on all the cows' top 20% genetics. Okay, so then after that, we first set up the sex semen use, and we do know there is an interaction between the sex semen and the beef semen use. So then the next thing is we set up the use of beef semen, and all the breedings that were not done with sex semen then could be done with either conventional or beef semen or a combination of both, conventional and beef. For example, there is a first scenario here on top in which all the other breedings that were not done with sex semen were done with conventional and nothing or no use of beef semen. And then you can see here in the next scenarios, there were more and more use of beef semen, 25%, 50%, and 75%, and even all the way to 100% of use beef semen besides the use of sex semen. So in this case, for example, the last column, the last row of this table means that we use only sex semen and only beef semen in the rest of the animals on that situation, which, by the way, is not uncommon in many farms nowadays, at least here in Wisconsin. We know several farms that are doing that, sex semen and beef semen and no conventional semen at all. Okay, so I'm not gonna go in details here. These were the specific market conditions at the time we did the analysis. This was a year or 2 ago. So they may not be too dated, but they may need some update as well. And that's why the importance of using a decision tool as the one I show you at the beginning. Now, one thing we came up as results in each one of the different repro levels of performance, this is, for example, the medium reproduction performance, is a number of results that in this case are visualized in 3 dimensions. I apologize for a lot of data in this graph, but I think it's important to get an idea for the next slides. Here we have in these 2 axes, which this would be the Z-axis and the X-axis, let's say, we have the use of beef semen from 0 to 100%. On this Z-axis, we have the use of sex semen from non-use on this side, all the way to 2C, that if you remember is used even up to the first breeding in the second lactation of animals. And on this Y-axis here, we have what I mentioned at the beginning, the income from calves over semen cost. One more thing I want to mention in this graph is that we have two types of indicators. One are these circles, and one are these cubes here. The circles indicate that we have more than plenty of replacements from inside our farm. And the cubes here represent that we need to buy extra replacements to maintain our herd size. You realize here that many of these cubes have a higher income from calves over semen costs. Because of the situation, the market prices, it meant, according to our data, that actually it was more profitable to try to use as much as possible of beef semen and buy replacements to the farm, and that will bring the maximum income from calves over semen costs. But we figured, and talking with farmers, that that's not a very desirable situation in many farms. Many farms would actually like to be within this circle. That means to have enough replacements within the farm. The size of the circles here and the cubes indicate how many more or less replacements we are having. So higher circles here indicate that we are having a lot of extra replacements, but our income from calves over semen cost is very low, even negative, very negative. So the idea is to reach a point like the ones I'm trying to highlight here, in which we have a positive income from calves over semen cost. That means that our net return is better than what we are doing now. We still have enough replacements. And in this case, for example, the one I'm pointing out here, the best situation in my mind would be this one, in which I have about more than 2,000 or around 2,000 income from calves over semen costs. I have enough replacements, and I have only a little more than enough replacements. I don't want to have a lot of replacements that later on I would need to sell. And in this case, in the situation nowadays in the US, it's more costly to raise the replacements than buy them from outside. So this may be the best situation here for these specific conditions. So now let's go a little more into the details we found out. Let's take a look. If you want to keep in mind that three-dimensional graph, it's useful to get an idea of these tables are following here. In this case, we're talking about a low repro farm, for example. And in all the cases, we came up with the idea that, and the assumption that the farmers would like to have the heifer balance greater than 0 or 0 at the very minimum, meaning that the farmers would like to have enough replacements from inside the farm as a condition. And within that condition, we try to find out the maximum income from calves over semen cost, okay? And here in this column, well, in the first column, we are seeing different scenarios of changes of market prices. And we are finding here in this column, the best sex semen situation and the best beef semen situation. Let's take a look at this. You stop. If you remember, the first lactation best genetics to sex semen, and 25% of beef semen on the rest used to conventional semen. But if you see, we will reach a heifer balance of 0, which is good, but our income from calves over semen cost will be negative, more than 3,000 negative, meaning that I'm losing money by doing this proposition. So I would be better off not using sex semen and beef semen in that situation. There are some situations, indeed, in this case, only one situation in which I can reach a positive value with extra calves, heifer balance positive and greater than 0, but I will need a series of conditions to happen to make that happen. And indeed, it's not using any beef semen, only a lot of sex semen on that situation. Point B is the repro performance of the farm will have a great influence on our opportunities of using sex and beef semen. So as a little conclusion of the low repro farms or low repro performance is that at the best, we will use sex semen in heifers in the first service. In most of the cases, less than 25% of beef semen, so very little opportunity of use beef semen. But the point probably more important here is that in most of the cases, it's a very negative income from calves over semen cost, so the opportunity is very low. Only positive when we have a very, very high values of the calves, the crossbreed calves. Okay, so if we see the medium repro farm, the situation is quite different indeed. And if you look, the table is set up very similar to the previous case, but if you look to the column that says income from calves over semen cost here, the one I'm highlighting, and it has different colors there, you can see that if you browse over the numbers, there is only one number that's negative, all the others are positive. And in all the cases, you can have a positive value of heifer balance. So we have, first point, we have enough balance of replacement from the farm. That's great. And we have, in most of the cases, a positive value, meaning that I'm making more money of what I'm doing currently if I would use only conventional semen. So there is an opportunity to use beef and conventional semen. Let's take a look to one example in this table. Let's take a look in this case that the price of beef is changing from $75 to $300. And in that situation, you can see our best use of sex semen would be up to all the way to first breeding of the second lactation. And that proposes also to use 100% of beef semen, not use of conventional semen at all in this case. Our income from calves over semen cost would be almost $5,000, and I still have enough replacements out of the herd. Good opportunity of using this with a medium reproduction performance. So in conclusion about this, for medium repro, in many cases, we will prompt to use a lot of sex semen, and in most of the cases, at least 50% of beef semen or even more. Sorry about that. Let me move forward. Okay, now I'm back where I was. In most of the cases, positive income from calves over semen cost, only one case of negative in a very special situation. So lots of opportunity with medium repro farms. And if we see high repro, you will see the situation is even much, much promising. In this case, there is no negative at all. In all the cases is positive, but not only that, very highly positive. And we have obviously, as a condition, heifer balance always positive. And you can see here in most of the cases, it's proposing to use beef semen to 100% on the rest of the breedings after the sex semen. And you can see also the sex semen is quite high in most of the cases. So as a little conclusion about this part is that in most of the cases, we will use a lot of sex semen. Most of the cases, 100% of beef semen, so a lot of use of beef semen, always positive, and some it will they will create even a lot of extra heifer balance, even when we impose high levels of use of beef semen, which it's showing actually what we would expect. The fact that having a high reproductive performance, it is a very good asset to do many other potential profitable decisions. One of those is use different type of semen. Another would be, I would like to just put that here in the table, the fact of using genomic tests on newly born calves, for example. That would be an option. If we have so many additional replacements being born in the farm, we have a better opportunity to actually select the best animals and not raise all of them. Because as I mentioned before, it seems to be quite an expensive proposition if we're not gonna use those animals later on. So let's take a look to the main take-home messages of the whole deal analysis I mentioned here. Semen strategies depend on two important things. farm performance, very important. The more or the better the reproduction performance, the better the opportunities. And obviously depend also on the market conditions. And it seems to be, it has been for a while already, that the crossbred prices of value of the calves have been above the calves, whether they are Holstein or Jersey or any other dairy breed. So there is an opportunity there, and it seems that that opportunity will continue. The other important point is sex semen has great benefit, but it seems to be that there is a lot of interaction between sex semen and beef semen. So if we want to use more beef semen, it is very likely that sex semen will enter into the equation as well. So the better opportunity may be when we use in combination, in a good combination, both of them. And if we have opportunity to buy heifers from outside, replacements from outside, and we are comfortable and willing to do that, our value would be even higher. So that will depend on a personal choice of the farmer. And the last point I want to make here, very importantly, is the fact that there is a tool, and it is available openly to anyone in this place, dairymgt.info. One way to find it is just to search in Google, dairy management, University of Wisconsin, or Department of Animal and Dairy Science in Wisconsin. And you should get there very quickly, very easily. On that website, there is a section about tools, and one of those tools is the one I have showed here, and you could use with your own data and with your own decisions. Okay, so with that, I would like to open to questions and discussion. I will be more than glad to entertain that, and it seems like we have plenty of time to go towards that.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate this. So the first question I'd like to ask is, how sustainable does the business look if using sexed and beef semen in a dairy herd?
Thanks for the question. I mean, we made another analysis indeed. There is a center in the U.S., the Food and Market Policy in Missouri, and actually they do projections about prices of many things, including milk and animals and beef. And actually, one interesting thing we found is that they follow the cycles of the beef market, beef animals, and prices of meat, at least in the US. And according to their projections, it seems to be that at least for the next decade, at least until 2030 or so, the prices of beef will continue to climb, maybe not at a fast pace, but for sure, one thing that they are very certain seems to be that they will not decline. Under those conditions, if we continue with the trend of improving reproductive performance in general, there seems to be that the possibilities of using sex and beef semen are here to stay. More specifically, beef semen, which, I mean, it's not that has been totally new to the industry, but it has caught up in the last 5 years. It seems that's here to stay. And then the next point I would like to make based on that question is the fact that it is a great opportunity. Many farmers are using that opportunity, but I think we also need to be very conscious in the dairy industry that we are providing an important asset to a different type of business, which is the meat and beef business. And therefore, maybe here, the next step we will need to take care is to not only produce any type of calves, but try to produce the best crossbreed animals for the beef industry. So we may think on a sustainable and long-term future based on that proposition.
So what type of beef semen would you recommend?
I mean, a very good question, thanks. The one the farmers use the most is Angus. I know there are farmers that use different limousine, for example, it's a very common as well. This analysis we didn't do taking into consideration any type of beef breed in general. As I mentioned in my previous comment, I think that's something we should actually look further and in detail to see what are the best options for the industry, what's the ones that are more requested and demanded in the beef industry, and we should try to accommodate the best we can on that sense.
What are the ways to rank heifers and cows without genomic testing?
Oh, very good. I see. If I understand well, but I would be more than glad to adjust the answer after responding if I'm not following exactly. But if I understand well, the question is basically how, if we don't do genomic tests, how we should or could rank the newborns to select them because we don't want to raise all of them or we want to do different things with them. What I would use is the genetic information of the animals, which comes from the parents, right? Nowadays, that information is available. Half of that information comes from the semen that you have used breeding the animals, and the other half comes from the maternal side. And there are very good calculations out there. In the US, we have the CDCB, the Council for Dairy Cattle Breeding. You can put an ID. I'm pretty sure Canada has even as good or even better systems that will have the genetic information on the parents of the animals, and it will calculate the genetic traits of the newborn and the reliability. So there are two pieces of information, the same as the genomic test. One would be the genetic trait. Let's talk about a combined genetic trait like the net merit or the breeding value of the animal. And the other part is the reliability. If we have the genomic test, our reliability will be very high, between 60, 70%. If we don't have the genomic test, the reliability would be much lower in the 20s or 30%. So therefore, our confidence in ranking the animals with the genomic would be better. But going now to the question specifically, and sorry it took me so long, but going to the question specifically, I would use that genetic information of the newborn and the reliability to rank the animals. I would know, I would miss some animals, but likely, depending on how I kinda, or what level I'm gonna select the animals, it's very likely that the top animals will remain the top and the bottom animals will remain the bottom. So still is a way to rank the animals using the simple genetic information on those animals.
Thank you. So is there a greater advantage to using sexed male beef semen for a greater calf value again?
Yes, yes, there is. Again, that comes to the same point that we need to provide the best to the beef industry that we can, so we can secure a long-term business sustainable within the dairy farm. It's an additional product we are producing on the dairy farm, and that product needs to be the breed that the beef industry wants, crossbred with Angus. Let's produce that, let's say, as an example. But the same thing, at the moment, as I mentioned during the presentation, the way this started, basically the price of the crossbred calf, whether it's male or female, was the same. Nowadays, we know in many situations in which actually there is a differentiation if it is male or female. So there is a already a push for using not only beef semen on dairies, but sex semen on the male side, beef semen on dairy cows. And I would go further because the next push is gonna be not only to use sex beef semen, but sex beef semen of certain quality. So the same as I was reading this morning, actually, there is a paper from Ireland, Donald Berry, and actually that's one of the points made there. We need to improve our genetic programs on the dairy and continue what has been a very good success throughout the years. But now that we have this new proposition, we need to also take care of somehow a genetic breeding on the crossbred side of the dairy beef proposition.
Do AI companies look for easy calving in beef semen bulls?
I do think they do, yes. I think that's an issue and a proposition or a concern that farmers would have by using beef semen. And it will depend on the combination, what kind of beef and what kind of breed the dairy herd has. But yes, I do believe they are looking into that because, as I said before, I think it is nowadays widely recognized that beef semen is here to stay in the dairy industry.
What type of beef semen would you prefer for a high temperature country?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think I would need to look at that, but at the moment I have no idea about that.
Okay, well maybe I will connect you with that person after the webinar and
yes,
see if you guys can connect on that. That looks like the end of our questions. I'd like to say thank you.
Should I mention, if you allow me to interrupt you for a second, there is gonna be in the dairy science meeting this year in July, there is gonna be a special session on beef semen use on dairy at the dairy science meeting. So I think one of the points that are gonna be discussed there is many of the questions that have come during this conversation. So for those who are looking for that information, I think it's gonna be coming more and more in the next few months.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you for coming out and speaking with us. This has been a great opportunity. We really appreciate your time.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye now.